What's up, YouTube? Today we're doing something different. We're doing another Brawler ranking list, but this one's different than any one I've done before. We are gonna rank Brawlers based on their skill cap. That is, how difficult a Brawler is to use, or how much skill does it possibly take to play a Brawler at its highest level. The higher that is, the higher their skill cap is. I think this is an interesting ranking list for Brawl Stars. Obviously, there's auto-aim in the game, so some Brawlers don't take that much skill. I just want to try something different. Let me know what you think below. Personally, I think this is an interesting look at the game. Obviously, auto-aim has a really big impact on the skill cap of all of these Brawlers, and to me, I found this interesting to look at, but definitely let me know what you think below about the state of the game as far as how much skill it takes to really be good, and at the same time, keep in mind, there's also game knowledge skill as well, beyond just Brawler skill, which is pretty much what this is about. All right, let's start out at the bottom of this ranking list. We're going to go through these bottom ones pretty quickly because, well, they're at the bottom because you mostly use auto-aim with a lot of these bottom Brawlers. At number 21, we have Poco. Yeah, Poco is so easy to use. He's got a really wide attack. Even if you're not auto-aiming, he's really, really easy to use. Even his super is easy to use. He doesn't have any hard mechanics about him. Possibly the hardest part of playing Poco is timing your heal for important moments. But yeah, he's pretty easy. Moving on. At 20, it's Shelly. Yeah, shotgunners, pretty shockingly easy to use with auto-aim. Even without auto-aim, they're still pretty easy to use. Really easy to use, and Shelly's no exception. Yeah, let's just move on. 19, Bull. Okay, really similar thing. His attack, really, really easy. Probably the hardest part with Bull, I mean, yeah, his super, there's a little bit of skill aiming with that, but there's not that much. There's not many different ways you can use it particularly. Probably the hardest part with Bull is just trying to dodge shots and get closer to enemies. But, I mean, a lot of times you're hiding, and he does have that faster move speed too. So let's move on. 18, Daryl. Again, really, really similar to Bull, right? Shotgunner. Daryl's a little bit more difficult than Bull because he has two shotgunners, so you could probably try and say there's a little bit higher skill cap trying to use that, but I still think most everyone uses auto-aim, and that's still probably the most effective way to do it. Obviously, you don't want to auto-aim his super, and that can take a little bit of skill. You can possibly try and be really tricky with that. There's potential to be tricky with that, but usually there's not, like in Heist. So let's move on. 17, Frank. Frank, especially with his longer range, is definitely easier to use. Maybe you're not auto-aiming all the time, but you definitely can, especially after you stun someone with his super. Yeah, Frank, I mean, he's just got a fairly wide range, and it reloads so fast, so if you miss, it's not a big deal. He also has a lot of health, so if you take some damage, you're also not going to get punished too hard, usually. So yeah, Frank, also not that hard to use. 16 is El Primo. In my opinion, El Primo is probably the hardest to use of the tanks, but he's still not that hard to use. The part where El Primo definitely does take skill to some degree is as a ball carrier in Brawl Ball. Using him attacking-wise, you could say his super takes a small amount of skill, but that stuff doesn't take that much. Using him in Brawl Ball as a ball carrier can definitely take some skill for sure, and that's why he's above everyone else. That definitely takes a little bit more skill than all the other interactions, but outside of Brawl Ball, he doesn't take that much skill. 15, it's Pam. Pam definitely doesn't take that much skill. You can auto-aim. A lot of times I definitely don't like to with Pam because you sort of want to pre-fire to a small degree since her shot takes a long time to shoot all of her bullets. But I mean, obviously everything else is pretty easy. All you gotta do is place down her turret. Her star power activates by herself. There's nothing else to do. You're just aiming your shots and keeping your distance. Pam is definitely really easy to use. You could even argue for Pam to be a little bit lower, and you know what? I would agree with it. 14, it's gonna be Nita. Nita also definitely really easy to shoot her attacks, but I put Nita higher for a good reason, in my opinion. It's one thing that's really important at being a good Nita is effectively peeking around walls. Nita is really, really good at just being slightly over the edge of a wall and shooting around it and getting her full shot and getting those hits. Nita's really good at what I call peeking, which is where you just go in and out behind walls, shooting and going back into cover, shooting and going back into cover. And her shot takes, half a second to travel, so you're able to get that damage and go back in and not take damage yourself. So Nita, that's definitely an important skill with Nita. Otherwise, Nita doesn't take that much skill. But that in itself does take a little bit of skill, and knowing that also with Nita, you do definitely have to dodge to some degree, as Nita has a really short range. So you have to be able to get within range with Nita, and Nita doesn't have that faster move speed that tanks do, although she does have a good amount of health. At 13, it's going to be Tara. Tara, probably the most skilled part of using Tara is with her super. That's definitely not something you want to auto-aim. You can if they're like at a really far distance. That's the only time it might make sense at all. If it's like a quick reaction, they're really far away. But otherwise, you don't want to auto-aim with her super. So her super can be a little bit difficult to aim. But otherwise, there's not a lot of skill with Tara. You can peek shot with Tara as well to some degree. With manual aiming with Tara, you can sometimes get 2 cards versus 1. That's a little bit of skill. But otherwise, a lot of times, you're probably auto-aiming with her normal attacks. So that part's definitely not that skilled. Definitely the skilled part with Tara is using her super. So here we are at 12, and I don't feel like we're at any brawlers who really take that much skill to use yet. And 12 is the same. 12 we have Crow. Crow is definitely pretty easy to use. You can auto-aim with his attacks. You can auto-aim with his super. You can probably auto-aim with everything, but you definitely probably don't. I think it's better not to. You can. If you want to play the best Crow that you can, you probably shouldn't auto-aim. With his normal attacks, trying to get that 1 poison dagger at far range, you definitely don't want to auto-aim. And when you jump in, sometimes when you jump with his super, you don't auto-aim as well because you want to be more predictive of where they're running as opposed to just auto-supering wherever they are at that moment. Maybe once you super, you spam the auto-aim button if they are right next to you. But otherwise, there's not totally necessary to auto-aim with Crow, and probably the best Crow isn't going to be auto-aiming that often. At 11, it's going to be Jessie. Now, Jessie's super is obviously not going to take that much skill to play, and same with her star power doesn't take that much skill, but her shot does take a degree of skill to shoot her shot accurately, as it is a really slow-moving shot. It is also a big shot, so that definitely helps. Getting those bounce shots doesn't take any skill. You don't have any control over the bounce shots particularly, but their shot does take some skill to shoot, and that's really the only reason Jessie is this high, as it is a slow shot, slow-moving shot. So you do sort of have to predictive shoot with Jessie to try and figure out where they're going, and also trying to get the maximum amount of bounce shots you possibly can, shooting in those high-volume areas, also shooting where you think people are going to be running into, and also potentially having multiple shots to shoot to make sure you do get that hit, as it is such a slow-moving shot. Sometimes that can be a good way to ensure you get that hit. There's definitely some skill with Jessie. Also, as a gem carrier, she's not a super high health one, so you have to be cautious with her. She's a more damage dealer oriented, more control with her turret. She can keep map control, but she's not going to be super protective otherwise. At 10, we're going to have Spike. Spike definitely takes a degree of skill, in my opinion. With Spike, you sort of want a peek shot similar to how you do with Nita, shooting that shot going back behind walls. Now, he does have a fairly large shot, so it's not the hardest to get hits with him, but it definitely takes some skill. And you also want to, I mean, of course, the RNG factor with his spikes takes away some of the skill potential with Spike. If it was set, he could be higher on this list because then getting those 1 spike hits would be skill and not luck, but currently it's luck. Otherwise, though, there's definitely a degree of skill with Spike. His super also takes a little bit of skill as well. You could auto-aim with Spike to some degree, but you're definitely not going to reach your full potential auto-aiming with Spike. You want to be a little bit predictive with Spike, shooting where they're going. Of course, with pretty much all these brawlers, just shooting at close range, you can auto-aim regardless for the most part, except for a few. But yeah, Spike's no exception to that degree. But shooting long range, medium range with Spike, you probably don't want to auto-aim. And he does take a little bit of prediction to figure out where enemies are going. At 9, it's going to be Brock. Now, Brock is one of the longest range brawlers in the game, if not the longest. So he definitely takes skill for those long range shots. Now, this close range one's not at all, but as I was saying earlier, that's the same with pretty much everyone. He has a fairly large projectile, so that definitely helps with aiming his shots and getting those hits. But of course, long-range shots definitely take a degree of prediction and figuring out where they're going. It is a little bit fast moving, but not super fast. Now, his super is pretty hard to aim accurately. That definitely takes skill. You can auto-aim with that. And frankly, if you're not really good at aiming his super, maybe you're better off auto-aiming his super. But you're not going to reach your full potential with Brock if you're auto-aiming his super. You definitely want to aim that manually if you're trying to be best case scenario with Brock. And same with his normal attacks as well. You don't want to be auto-aiming his normal attacks. You want to be firing where you think they're going, and that is really important with Brock getting those hits. Also getting the pressure of pushing them into certain areas is also important with Brock. At 8, it's going to be Colt. Now, Colt definitely takes a degree of skill to aim with him. We're starting to get into the more higher skilled brawlers, or the higher skill cap brawlers, where there's a big difference between the really good of that brawler and the, well, auto aimers, or the not very good of that brawler. With Colt, you can auto aim to a degree and you're gonna be pretty successful. That's why Colt's not gonna be a lot higher on this list. But if you are really good at aiming manually with Colt, there's definitely a big difference between a really good Colt and an okay Colt. So Colt definitely can be higher on this list, but to me, he's a bit streaky. Even the really good Colt sometimes can go cold. You can definitely dodge Colt to a decent degree, but Colt definitely has that high skill cap with figuring out where brawlers are going, and also with his super is definitely kind of hard to aim. And you don't really want to auto-aim with any of his attacks normally unless they're at like medium to close range. At 7, I'm going to have Colt's counterpart, Ricochet. I think Ricochet takes a little bit more skill. And to me, it's something that honestly just takes a little bit of time to figure out, and then you sort of get it. With Ricochet, one thing that's really, really important, of course, as is his name, is figuring out the bounces for Ricochet on every single map. You got to know those direct angles to do well, get the best possible shots with Ricochet on every single map. You have to know those angles. That's going to make you win those matchups, whatever brawler you're facing against, allowing you to get hits where they're not going to be able to hit you, and you're going to out-damage them, because Ricochet is a really low-health brawler. This is also true with his super as well. With Ricochet, you don't want to be auto-aiming pretty much at all, because if you're auto-aiming with Ricochet, you're not going to be getting those bounces. Of course, close range, right? You can always auto-aim with any brawler, for the most part. But Ricochet, you almost never want to be auto-aiming, because that definitely makes him take a lot more skill to use. Now at 6, it's going to be Piper. To me, there's a really big difference between a really good Piper and an okay Piper. Now Piper, you could argue to be a little bit lower, because there's some cases where you can auto-aim fairly well with Piper and do okay. There's definitely some cases where that works with Piper, but if you want to be the best Piper possible, you're really not auto-aiming very often with her. And a lot of times you gotta be predictive shots, you gotta figure out where people are likely to be, their likely pathing, and things like you gotta have really good game knowledge to do really well with Piper as far as what are normal situations. On top of that, of course, Piper has a really low health, so that's definitely makes it a little bit harder to use, and her super, I don't know if this takes skill so much to use her super, but it's a really awkward super to use at the least. So you could argue it takes a little bit of skill to use her super. I mean, obviously you got to save it, but Piper definitely takes skill to use as far as her shots, in my opinion. You really got to know where people are going, so that's why Piper's going to be at 6. All right, at 5, it's going to be Barley. Now, Barley as a thrower, I mean, he has a wider radius than Dynamite for sure, but he definitely takes skill to use, in my opinion. His throw projectile speed is a little bit slow. You can dodge Barley to some extent. At the same time, Barley doesn't do a lot of damage, so it's really important with Barley to hit your shots. On top of that, Barley is really good at area control. So not only are you going for damage, but you're going to stop people from going to certain areas of the map. That's also very true with his super. You want to be careful where you throw it, either at a close range. It can definitely be difficult to use the super at close range, or you also got to know where to throw it on the map. Throwing it long range, you want to push enemies back in a certain direction, and you also want to wait at the right time, because if you do it too soon, they're just going to totally, walk away from Barley's super fairly easily if you're not careful with it. You also want to hit multiple people if possible. So there's definitely skill in almost everything Barley does. 4, it's going to be Bo. I really don't like using Bo, but he is a really high skill cap brawler in my opinion. Obviously, his star power takes no degree of skill, but his shot does take a good degree of skill in my opinion because of how it acts. I mean, it doesn't do a lot of damage, first of all, but the direction you strafe directly changes how his shot interacts or how it shoots. So that's really important to know the enemy movement as far as where they're going to be going and how you want to position yourself to get the correct angle shot on that brawler, because you got to know which direction they're likely to escape to, and you got to strafe in the correct direction to get the shot you want and get the most possible damage. And also, You want to be knowing, okay, am I going for that safe shot where I'm getting the wider spread on my shots, or am I going for the most damage where all 3 shots are going in a line with Bo? Bo definitely takes a high degree of skill if you're going to maximize his potential with his attack. But on top of that, his super also takes some degree of skill. You might think it doesn't because all you got to do is throw it down and forget about it. But a lot of times you want to be careful about how you do it, because if you're, where you throw it is really important, first of all. But on top of that, when you throw it is also important. If you're throwing it and everyone sees you throw it, if they're a good team, they're going to trip all those mines and it's not going to be a problem. You got to be careful about when you're throwing it as well as top of where you're throwing it. But there's definitely a degree of skill with his mines on top of his attack. So Bo is a high skill cap brawler for me. We're in the top 3. At 3, it's going to be Penny. Okay, now I've harped on this before, but Penny's shot is really difficult to use, okay? It's the smallest projectile in the game. All right, you're right. Her cannon, absolutely no skill whatsoever, really OP, and obviously you don't have to do anything besides place it down. Same with her star power, no skill. But her normal attack takes a lot of skill to use since it's so small, and of course you can also get the added benefit of the coins shooting out from her bag. So, that, you're not usually trying to always get that, but some degree of skill with that. Her projectile is just so small, it takes a lot of skill to use in my opinion because it's hard to aim because of how small it is. So yeah, Penny's going to be number 3. At number 2, it's going to be Dynamite. Now Dynamite, another thrower, but Dynamite, there's a lot of different ways you can be skillful with Dynamite. His projectile definitely takes a degree of skill to use. It's not nearly as wide as Barley, so you got to be a little bit more predictive about where enemies are going. You don't want to be just spamming your shots constantly. You don't want to be auto-aiming at all with Dynamite, ever. Even with a super nowadays, you don't want to be auto-aiming either. Used to be, his super used to auto-aim every single time and have a really, really good hit ratio. Now, they had a good nerf on his super. Now you're not really going to want to be auto-aiming that. So Dynamite, really high skill cap with his normal attack, with his super. On top of that, his star power takes a lot of skill to use effectively, because not only do you have to throw your mines or throw his dynamites on the ground in a place that's going to propel you in the correct direction that you want to go, you also might want to be getting damage as well, potentially like versus a Mortis. As a Dynamite, you can kill that Mortis with your star power if you do it correctly, but it takes a lot of skill to do it. Dynamite is going to be a really high skill cap brawler for me. All right, the one brawler not mentioned at number 1, the highest skill cap brawler in the game, for me, it's going to be Mortis. Now, Mortis, look, it's an auto-aim meta, and he's a really close range brawler who has the smallest amount of health. So that definitely puts him at a big disadvantage. You're going in at close range with a small amount of health. Now, he does have a healing super, which definitely helps out to some degree, but at the same time, he doesn't do that much damage. So Mortis is definitely a really high skill cap brawler. On top of just how unique he is with his dash, you got to try and dodge people with his low health. Now, he does have that star power that helps him pick up some health potentially, but of course, you can't control when you're getting that healing. You don't get to control where those souls drop. So you got to be a little bit predictive in trying to push enemies towards those souls without them knowing that those souls are there, so you can get that added benefit of that. On top of that, Mortis ball carrier in Brawl Ball takes a lot of skill. The difference between a really, really good Mortis in Brawl Ball and an okay Mortis is insane. A really good Mortis carries teams in Brawl Ball like no other, and it takes a lot of skill to do. That is definitely the highest skill cap part with Mortis, is using him in Brawl Ball, just being able to dodge through people, knowing when to push up with the ball, going through other people, knowing when to attack with Mortis, keeping the ball versus other Mortises. There's a lot of different interactions and situations with Mortis that takes a lot of skill to use. But Mortis, really high skill cap, almost everything he does. You usually actually, also you don't want to be auto-aiming with Mortis. Yes, you can auto-aim with Mortis to a degree, but you're not going to be getting the right angles you want. You're not going to be aiming at the right places you want with Mortis, so I definitely wouldn't recommend it. Mortis is going to be my highest skill cap brawler in the game. All right, guys, that's going to be my ranking list for the highest to lowest skill cap brawlers in the game. Let me know what you thought down below. And thank you so much for watching today's video. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll catch you later.